Scott Lucas is a professor of international politics at Birmingham University. Scott, always a pleasure to see you. Okay, let's presume that we do eventually see these tax returns. Possibly the best that Trump will hope for is that the American public sees that he's always paid every single bit of tax he owes. Maybe there have been loopholes that have allowed him and his companies to avoid certain taxes or to not pay as much as another company might, but all above board. But the worst case scenario is that the taxes have not been paid in full. Is there any steer in the US about what may be revealed if we ever do see those returns?
Well, the best case scenario for Donald Trump is that he gets a second term in office, because the appeals court said yesterday that while it is saying the tax returns cannot be withheld, it said we are not ruling on whether or not Donald Trump can be indicted and prosecuted while he is still in office. And indeed, we know that the special counsel Robert Mueller, in the related affair of the Trump-Russia matter, said, I could not indict a sitting president, but the day after Donald Trump stops being president, that might be the case. Now, what would be the substance of such an indictment or prosecution? Donald Trump's former lawyer and fixer, Michael Cohen, claimed in open testimony that the Trump Organization, Donald Trump's business, and that Donald Trump's charity had manipulated the books, that Donald Trump had misstated his tax liability to, in other words, shelter himself, whether in terms of how much he eventually had to pay, depending upon what his wealth was, and to minimize his insurance payments. Cohen went so far as to say that Donald Trump may be guilty of fraud. Now, I'm not saying Donald Trump is guilty of fraud, but here you have someone who was central to Trump for more than a decade who is making that allegation. And indeed, we know that the New York State authorities have considered this to be so serious that they have persisted for months in saying, we must see the records from Trump's accountants, Mazars USA, as well as his tax returns, to see exactly what is there that may give substance or may deny whether or not Donald Trump has committed financial crimes.
What about the constitutional issues here? Because Trump's lawyers continue to say that it's about his immunity as the president of the United States from criminal investigations. So you've already explained about possibly not being able to indict a sitting president. But if the taxes are revealed to show some kind of criminal activity or fraud, where does the Constitution then come in? Because the judges are making their decisions also referring to the Constitution.
We're in unknown territory, because the closest case that we have to this would be Richard Nixon, who in 1974, during the Watergate crisis, was accused of crimes trying to cover up the break-in against his political rivals, the Democrats. But Richard Nixon resigned before he could even be impeached. So he was not a sitting president. And then as soon as he resigned, his successor, Gerald Ford, pardoned him. So we never had a trial. We never had a test that has gone as far as where we are now with Donald Trump. And let's be honest here, this is not just a single case against Donald Trump. You've referred to cases which may be about tax manipulation. The New York State has brought cases regarding misuse of charity funds, which led to the closure of his charity. There is an accusation that Donald Trump has violated the U.S. Constitution through what's called emoluments. That is, for example, profiting from his office through, for example, foreign delegations staying at his resorts and hotels. So there are multiple cases that are there, even before you get to Trump Russia or Trump Ukraine. I don't have the answers. And to be honest with you, I don't think even as they rule on this case, the Supreme Court will have answers from previous courts. They will have to break new ground in whatever they decide.
And how worried are you about the decision that will come from the Supreme Court if indeed Trump's case does go to an appeal there? Because we've got these two most recent nominations that are Trump nominations who have swayed the balance of the court more to the conservative side. Can you really see, I mean, even in your worst nightmares, that the court would go the way of Trump because of their personal feelings towards the president?
Well, nominally, you talk about a 5-4 majority, conservative majority, because of the two appointees, Neil Gorsuch and Brett Kavanaugh. Brett Kavanaugh really hasn't been tested that much as a Supreme Court justice, but Neil Gorsuch has not gone down a strict Trump party line. You can't declare him, in terms of his decisions to date, to always rule in, quote, a conservative way that would favor the president. But let me just take this more broadly into this. I'm worried about not only the American Constitution, but about the American system, not just because of the makeup of the Supreme Court, because this is a president who has shown that he will try to defy the courts and try to defy Congress. So even a Supreme Court decision is not the extent of what we are facing under, well, basically a very unique president. We've got months to go before we see how this plays out.
Scott, thank you so much, as always. Scott Lucas from Birmingham University.